welcome to Nourishing the Mother, where inspired women talk about the journey of motherhood through the common thread of parenting, relationship, and sexuality as a path to consciousness. We ask, in what ways can we show up more fully, live more meaningfully, parent more wholly, and love more unconditionally? How can we mine the wisdom from the experiences of our lives and expand into those challenges? If you are here, you care about paving a path of conscious and intentional motherhood, connected with yourself and your gifts, and also illuminating your children in theirs, so we may raise more whole humans who can impact this world in a more humane way. And if you feel like giving a little back to this free content, please become a patron of the show and receive extra member benefits for less than a coffee a month. Or you can leave a review on iTunes and Facebook, all of which helps the podcast keep going and reach more mamas who need this type of tonic for the soul. Head on over to patreon.com/NTM podcast to find out more. We are Julie Tenner and Bridget Wood, and we are so grateful you're here.
Hello and welcome to Nourishing the Mother. I'm Bridget Wood.
And I'm Julie Tenner. And today's podcast is Love in the Time of Corona. So we're all back in lockdown if you are in Victoria, Australia. So there's noise at my house. So please be aware that there is background family goings-ons. We record today, and I really appreciate your patience as we navigate what it is to do life, business, and love in lockdown. So today we really want to be able to talk to you about the constraint and perhaps what it provides, the invitation that it offers to love better, polarity, neutrality, and perhaps a few other gems along the way, as we always tend to tangent off in different directions. Before we jump into that conversation, I'd love to remind you to jump onto nourishingthemother.com.au, scroll on down to the red banner, drop in your email address, and once every so often we keep you up to date with what is happening in our world, what you can jump in for to really nourish and love your world better and with more consciousness, so it can love you better in return. So nourishingthemother.com.au.
And we thought this would be a really relevant topic for wherever you find yourself, even if you're not in lockdown like us, because as Jules commented, like, this is going to be our year. It's likely going to be in and out of versions of lockdown. And so how do we move with that? How do we notice how the edges and trickiness of that shows up in our relationships? And how do we be with it and love into it as opposed to resist it? And I hope that that's where this episode takes us.
Yeah, I hope so too. So let's maybe just begin with relationship summaries, perhaps for both of us. How has the lockdown experience influenced or not influenced your relationship?
I think it's been really good for us in the sense that it has helped us find our resilience and find our togetherness and find also where our edges are as well, and how to notice where we might habitually move around them and instead go into them. I think certainly still creating reverence for the relationship even throughout being around each other 24/7 was and is really important. So that looks like, having a regular date night, even if we can't go anywhere, so that it's saying we're using this time to choose each other and to move into each other in even more depth than what being around each other offers, right? So this will lead to the conversation that we have, I guess, on moving past the neutrality that we get through the sameness of being around someone 24/7 to create polarity. It's certainly helped me see, like anything that you're around 24/7, you see what you don't enjoy. You see where there is what is difficult for you to be with and what you're judging. And even though I fucking hate that sometimes, I actually love it because I see where I'm being pulled to grow, and I see where there's work for me and there's work for us. So I guess I lean into that. I mean, I certainly felt like last year, and I even went into the year with this as a value, was prioritizing family connection, navigating relationships, simply because for us, having another child was a big area of growth for our relationship, to be able to expand and hold that and really meet that in a way that felt expansive. And so I saw my year as a way to continue to show up for that and to nurture that. And so that's really what I did. And I see this year as more of that practice, as more of that meeting each other, as well as meeting the needs of a toddler and a preschooler and, a very, individuating almost 8-year-old. And how do we find each other in that, on top of the demands of them? Yeah, that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I really love that. I think that that's the quantum question. How do we find each other on top of the demands of children as they already are and are moving into?
Yeah, and ourselves as well. Like, I mean, the degree to which we find it hard to find them and meet them, I often think our partner is also that part of us that's still trying to find who we are in these quickly shifting sands of who our children are, particularly when we identify strongly as mothers and we identify ourselves through how we are defined by our children too, and needed by our children and characterized by our children, because so much of our tending and nurturing, is identity creating as well. And when you're around it all of the time and there's not the definition perhaps that work provides you, or the definition that your social life provides you, or that time with friends provides you, all of those things that you create almost by the environments in which you're in those places, then you're constantly identifying yourself through the eyes of your children or through the eyes of what you see your mothering as. And so I think it's more of that stretching and more of that tending to who you are as you evolve and as your children need you in different ways, and maybe pull away in different ways too.
It's the hardest part, isn't it, when the people that we love shift, and so we're required to shift around them.
Yeah. And I think it's that heart ache, and then how do I love this transition? How do I love this person? How they're now being asked to be loved, because it's different to how it was. And can I hold myself in that crumbling in myself often, while still showing up to love who they are in front of me as they change. I mean, this is loving without any attachment to what it has to look like in return. Like to be with the constant maneuvering of what that love needs.
Yeah, we're loved better when we love better. Yeah.
What would you say?
It's the law of reciprocity, isn't it? I've been really sitting with the law of reciprocity in the last couple of weeks and just ruminating on it.
Yeah, and this idea of what you give. Yeah, like it can, if you feel like you're giving so much, and it feels like you're feeling an edge of resentment, then you're not aware of the receiving that you're getting through that giving.
Yeah, but even deeper still, just as a larger umbrella, which is, I think more simplistically, that the law of giving is receiving.
Because you receive through the very act of giving, because you can't not receive something at the same time.
It was so, I mean, so much. So and it was my birthday on Friday, and I wasn't really on my phone because, of course, then we went into lockdown, and like my birthday got trumped by, okay, we've got to organise shit to survive the next 5 days.
Yeah.
But so I didn't really look at my phone, and I actually mostly sat down today to go through my messages, which was beautiful and overwhelming because my emails were full, my messenger was full, my inbox was full, like every platform full of message. I want to be able to consciously be with that level of abundance and deeply appreciate each human who has taken time out of their life to send me light and love of some sort, right? Just birthday message. I still think that's an intentional plug-in that someone could just as easily have avoided as a level of love and intimacy, right? And they chose to do that, so I want to choose. So I sat down this morning and went through all of that. And I actually ended up in tears where I was like, holy shit, I'm doing this work in the world because I couldn't not. And even though people pay me for that work, and I already see that exchange one feels really good, but I also think that I receive more than they do in that exchange anyway. That my heart and my soul and develops my wisdom. So I already feel like that's an incredible law of reciprocity already.
Yeah.
And then I sat there and went, holy shit. I had a woman write me the most incredible poem, and another woman draw me this incredible picture from her own art and heart. And I had videos of mum singing happy birthday to me, dancing with their babies. And
so gorgeous.
Overwhelming love and gratitude for something that they pay me to do. And I just thought, my God, if we ever have that moment where we get too self-righteous about, oh, I'm giving too much and oh, blah, 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 I think, fuck, we don't even know the ripples of profound impacts that we have when we just love another well. And not because we perceive that we will one day get something out of them, but simply because it's the truest expression of our hearts in that moment. And you give over and love from that place. And here it was like this tsunami of love, which I chose obviously to open on today's Valentine's Day as we're recording. And I was like, oh my God, this is just amazing. So I also think that happens in our relationships and in our parenting as well.
Yeah.
You know, I grew up with the concept from my mother or I think it's in some extent a cultural one that, well, you know, I gave you life, so therefore you owe me for the rest of your life. You know, that kind of, I gave you life. I gave you my body. I gave you my breasts. I gave you my career. The versions of whatever that narrative is that we hear. I think it's probably our parents' generation more than our current generation. Whereas I never looked at motherhood as something that my children ever had to pay me back for. I always looked at it as this was an experience that I chose to have, to experience a deeper, more profound love and to learn how to give beyond my own limitations. So I'm already winning. There's nothing that child soul owes me ever because I chose this for my soul. So I think
I love what you said there. So you said, I'm learning to love beyond my own limitations. And then I guess every child offers you an opportunity to love beyond the perception of your own limitations right now.
Right?
Yeah.
And not even that, every stage.
Yeah, exactly. Because, you know, can you only love them when they represent what you think is worthy?
Yeah, right.
Because the ultimate is to love what you disdain, isn't it?
Yeah.
I had that conversation I've been having lots of conversations with my mum lately about mothering and what you face in yourself as you mother and what judgments you have to meet. And she had said to me, because we talked a bit about the teenage years and what parts she found hard, And she said, look, you know, for so long I always judged the girls who got picked up from school, because she was a high school teacher, who got picked up from school by their boyfriends. And then you had one like that. You know, you had the boyfriend like that, and that was you. And that what that was like for her to continue to show up and love me at the same time as kind of clutching on for dear life to the struggle of that for her. You know, to see her daughter, her teenage daughter, partner with someone who she would see as very undesirable, but still love me in that enough, and like love him in some way because I'd chosen that. Like, I mean, isn't that like the ultimate stretching as a parent, to have to face into everything that you've judged and everything that you have contempt for? Like,
yeah, 100%.
Like, it just like blows my mind and heart.
Oh no, I know, and that very dynamic with partners. Actually, I ask every mother who has children older than mine about that very dynamic, because I want to be prepared for women, because I see that as quite pivotal in the transition that they make with you as the parent-child dynamic as they venture into adulthood. So I love reflection, because I think partly loving is standing back and letting your own heart stretch while your child has an experience of their own making.
Yes.
As opposed to trying to save that pain. Yeah, but it's brutal. I think about that. I prepare myself for that as often as I possibly can. What was I about to say?
I'm sorry, I totally interrupted.
I was just going to say. No. I was just thinking, anything we judge, we end up crashing into, though, right? Like anything we're self-righteous about, anything we judge, we end up crashing into. Like on this parenting journey, we're just in a full circle, aren't we?
Yeah. Yeah. God.
So let's bring it back around to relationship. What does loving through the constraint and what it provides you mean?
So I think that we often can perceive this time of Corona and like our outer world restricting us in terms of where we can go, how we move about the world. And so does that constraint feel burdensome and take the life out of your relationship because of how you feel burdened by the outer world and its infringement on your, you know, in inverted commas, freedom? Or does it take you deeper into asking, what have I decided that I needed outside of this relationship to make this relationship come alive? And how do I create that from within the relationship? You know, because often people will be about, I need to go and have this holiday and need to kind of go overseas and like inject our relationship with this amazing tropical experience, or, you know, that I need to look outside of the relationship for the vitality to put into it, right? Like that it has to be this outside experience. But what if actually it's really that this relationship is so full of mystery and potential that I simply haven't explored and can explore regardless of how the outer world is, but from how I show up to it and from how I view this person in front of me who I've characterized into a set of traits and behaviors that match the identity that I have for myself right now. But what if I was to see them a little differently, to see the potential here a little differently, that there could be a new reality regardless of what outer world constraints there might be on us to experience our love. So that's the way I would characterize it, because we think that we'll go somewhere and experience something different, but we just take ourselves to that new place. Wherever we go, there we are. So what if actually, and like my husband was saying, you know, he just still has this dream of us going to the Maldives and us having this amazing like hut on the water and what that would look like. And like, I love it, but it's also, okay, well, what is it that you're wanting to experience in that? And in what ways can we bring that here? Like, can we pull aspects of that fantasy into the reality that we have right now and not have to wait until we're transported to some paradise? What if there's there's untapped paradise here. Yeah.
It's really beautiful. I love that. What if there was untapped paradise here?
Because then it's an invitation, and then you're not burdened by the restrictions outside of you. You're only burdened by the degree of imagination you have.
I do think that's where the art of imagination comes in, doesn't it? Because we can alter the state by altering what we think about or dream about or visualize about, right?
Yeah, totally. And it asks us to be creative, and it also asks us to stretch beyond the rules we might have for ourselves, the safety that we might have created by what we can't do, right? Because there's a lot of safety that we can habitually develop simply because, I can't do that. And if you say you can't do that, well, then you're actually saying, well, I'm not willing to stretch beyond the belief I have right now that that's impossible for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I see it.
What about the invitation to love better? How have you been invited to love better?
I think even seeing my husband and his challenge last year with losing his job, and how to love him better was to really allow him to collapse into his feminine and to feel the heartbreak of what he experienced, and for me to not need him to be strong in those moments, because I've certainly see how I rely upon his ability to hold it all of the time, and his ability to provide pretty relentlessly, and to learn to love him into that, to love him deeper into his own experience of his own pain was a deeper initiation into seeing and accepting more of him. Because if he sensed that somehow that wasn't safe to collapse into or safe to experience, then he likely would have tried to cover it up or not feel it, because he had this role he'd defined himself by and needed to be in order to be loved by me and by us. And so I certainly see how last year was an invitation to trust him and trust his falling apart as a pathway to his completeness, and then our completeness, right? Because the more permission I give him in that, the more permission I give myself in that as well.
How do you love him through the places that you find really hard and you're like, fuck, okay, but I'm struggling here too, and he can't with that at all?
On that particular one, I didn't feel like I was struggling a great deal. Like, I didn't feel like it was a tussle for who needed more then. I probably found that at different times, but for that particular time, I was really able to, because I had the vision that said, I feel like we're going to be okay here. So I could hold where it was. Like, I assumed the masculine in that because I could see the purpose of that. Yes. But probably at other times that tussle has been stronger with adjusting to new babies and how to redefine our roles in that in a way that meant that there was space for both of our experiences.
How have you done that? Because I think that's something that women struggle with a lot, or couples.
Yeah.
Couples.
Yeah, I think it would have been strongest with Pearl, that experience, where there was experience for both of us to really understand his feminine wounding, which was just to not ask to have his needs met and just push them away. And so his needs became so repressed that eventually they exploded. And what out came his hurt at a time when I was already like 1 month postpartum trying to like figure the shit out. And so that was a little tussle in terms of him expressing his needs, but we're really kind of like, I just won't have any, was kind of the way he characterized it. And then me saying to him, I want you to have those needs and I need you to express those needs, or no one's really getting anything met here. And so that was a process of us both being willing to have those hurt edges nudged and be with them in a way that wasn't making the other person responsible for them. And so, I mean, part of my like mantra working through that was like to not fight reality, because this was the reality we were in, was this sense of he had these needs that he was denying to the point where he then was losing himself and disowning himself in order to still be able to be accepted and loved. And I was at this place of, well, I felt a little blindsided by it because I didn't expect him. I didn't know that's where he was at. And so it was interesting for me to then reflect on, okay, well, how was I complicit in some way? Because certainly I think whatever we have in relationship, we're somehow co-creating. So there's a part of me that was attached to his ability to deny himself so that mine and our kids' needs were really well met. And so I had to orient to what it would look like to tune into the love that he needed and provide that from a place that meant that there wasn't getting to the depletion that he and we got to then, from a really conscious place. So it's like caring for him in the way that he shows his care for us as well, because everybody shows, we all give love through our highest values. And so to see his giving of love and see that also as a communication of how he'd love to receive love. And so how could I give more in that way? And almost check in with needs and check in with his heart and how he was feeling with my provision of love and like, just being tuned into that flow of love, I think, in the relationship, but also his need, if we consider the masculine need for freedom, which we always talk about, how was that being met right now? Because it wasn't being met at that time of intense postpartum experience. And so now it looks like me celebrating him going and doing that, and that being really safe for him to, like just recently him like writing in the diary and like checking in with me on some times that he wants to go and do stuff for him. And that there's no guilt around that for him, because often he would put family first because it's a really high value. But yeah, for me to really celebrate his filling up in ways that feel nourishing with him, and for me to have zero edge of complaint or resentment around that, because I see how much that nourishes him, just like he sees how much what I love nourishes me. So it's kind of a roundabout way. I don't know if that explains it.
No, I loved it. I thought it was beautiful. I thought that what I loved was that you went, oh, you know what? Actually, this time our advanced practice was such that we could, which I think is the case in all healthy and functional relationships, is that whoever is in need, the other one can step up. No different to the idealized version of leadership within a country would be during wartime, the people that are best for that, and during peacetime, the people that are best for nurturing and nourishing, right? Like if we had a more fluid concept of leadership and expanded what it was that leadership meant, that there's leadership in the feminine as much as there's leadership in the masculine, and leadership can look like stepping forwards as much as it can look like stepping backwards, that then this is what would function within an individual, that would happen, and within a couple that would happen, and within a family that would happen, community, country, so on and so forth. Yeah. What I had in that was just that beautiful, that speaks to me of a healthy relationship. It's not healthy based on we both have our shit together and communicate perfectly all of the time in practice. It's, well, fuck, we're human and we're able to build our self capacity and our regulation capacity within the couple to recognize that in peacetime and wartime, there's different versions of who's stepping up and down, and it's fluid. Right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I really loved that. I think that speaks to a really healthy relationship. And then I love that what you did was answer my question based on, but I can remember a time when that was true for me, and brought that forward. So I actually thought it was super relevant. And what I loved out of that conversation was we all actually want to receive love in the way that we give love. But often what will happen is we only want to give love in the way that we want to receive it. So I love
So you have these, like, you kind of not even meeting each other, you're just kind of skimming across.
So I actually really love, because you and I talk about values all of the time, and I think they can be abstract for a lot of people. But what I loved was the simplicity that you offered there, which was look at the way your partner gives love to the world, to his woman, to his children, to his family, to his work, to his community. Like, how does he give love, give of service, give of himself, meet, give what he's lit up by? And you can go that and go, oh, okay, that's the form that would feel most nourishing and that you would have the greatest awareness for if I gave you those things. So I'm going to learn how to give you those things because they're not innate in me, because it's not my values, and nor should they. But I can choose to see you with more clarity, not go, well, you should see my values and you should appreciate the way that my values present, but not actually offering the same to your partner. You want them to love your values, love their values. It's a law of reciprocity.
Yeah.
So I really actually just loved that, is we are loved better when we love better. And part of loving better is giving what that other human needs, or that the moment needs, in order to meet the other human in their woundedness, which is just a repeat of their childhood, right? Rather than what you want in the moment.
Yeah. And to be vulnerable enough to sit with where you miss the mark as well, and be with their feedback and be able to hold that feedback, because that's a real practice, is to be able to go, oh, like the kind of irritation that I'm sensing is because there's a perception of I'm not meeting you, and can I, like, be with that without getting defensive? Can I be with the truth that you're communicating to me without my own feelings of it should be different than that cloud the fact that you're giving me feedback, and that might be hard to hear, but I'm, like, seeking to hold myself here and hear that.
Yeah, I think the capacity to be self-regulated enough that you can receive a reflection other than the way that you choose to see yourself, kind of emotional intelligence. It's fragility if you cannot tolerate that someone will see you differently to the way that you see yourself.
Yeah.
Because the truth is, everyone outside of you sees you clearer than you see yourself. Like, that's just the way it is.
Which kind of feels like a little bit like, the emperor's kind of got no clothes. Like, this idea of, like, who you think you are and, like, how the world actually sees you. Like, if you sit with it too long, it's deeply uncomfortable.
It freaks you out. Yeah, I know. I sit with it. I do this all the time. I go as far as I can. I go, whew, it's enough down that tunnel. Off we go. Back
in my illusion for a while.
Yeah. I did this with my daughter around the dinner table the other night. She was really not liking my feedback. And so we were talking about this concept of fragility versus needing to separate the self from something that you're doing, and you're receiving feedback on what you're doing rather than it meaning anything about you.
Or, like, separating the behavior from, like, the person.
Yeah, because the fragility that goes, well, fuck you, and I'm going to fight and bull in a china shop, I'm going to get you before you get me, is fragile. It's the person who is deeply insecure and wounded versus the person who goes, I know who I am. I know I'm a good human. And actually, I can breathe in and check about whether my integrity was intact there, or was it a little lacking? And probably, if I was really honest with myself in that moment, it was a bit lacking. For all the reasons, sure, we're never going to be perfectly, in integrity all of the time, because we have energy that's deciding where it goes and what it serves. And sometimes we're going to choose to give 20% over there. And at some point, someone might pull us up on that.
Yeah.
And then in that moment, we get to decide, is this something I really do want to be in greater integrity with? Or is this something that I really am fine to let go and just honor the other person, how they feel? Anyway, we're having this kind of big conversation and couldn't pull her out of her shell. So I just said, it's so fine. I'm okay with receiving feedback because I know I don't see myself clearly. Like, I know that. So round table, give it to me. And I put my hands back and when I'm not going to defend it. I'm going to take on board your reflection and just witness that that's me too. And she didn't feel safe enough to start that. So I started with my husband and, we went around the table and I received feedback from the people that know me the best, who see possibly the ugliest parts of me because they see me the most, right? And it was a beautiful experience because I think the more we can do that, the less we have to believe that we have to be something different to what we are in this moment.
Yeah.
Oh, Gwenny's having a hard time. All right, I think somebody's with us. So I don't know how we got onto that. How did we get onto that? Just loving better, meeting.
Yeah, but just being able to be with your own discomfort and hold yourself in the reflection that your intimate relationship offers you for how you show up or don't show up.
Yes, 100%. And how I can love into that more deeply rather than that being the place that I stop and retract from. Right? Is that that's
it. That's it. Because, and it's so true. It's kind of like, I think about it in like a corporate setting. It's like actually willingly seeking out like that 360-degree feedback from your family. Because I mean, lots of like corporates do this now, this 360-degree feedback, which upper management ask of their direct lines as well, like that they'll
360-degree feedback.
Well, it basically means that you're asking for feedback not from just the top above you, you're asking for the feedback from who reports to you as well. And so you're seeing how you're perceived and how you can grow up and down, like in terms of the hierarchical structure or just in terms of how you relate to your team, like upwards and downwards. And I think it's great because it requires an enormous amount of humility.
Yeah.
An enormous willingness to see your shadow. Our shadow representing the part of ourselves that we can't see, but that is always there.
And the truth is you can't change anything if you're not aware of it.
Yeah.
So you can either choose to go, that's not true, that doesn't exist, that's not true of me. Or you can go, wow, shit, that's a reflection of me. What do I want to do? What do I want to do?
And can I hold it with curiosity and see it's the function and purpose of it? Or do I like descend into shame and kind of say, well, I'll just never reveal that part of myself again because it's just too painful to be with that part, right? And then we shrink.
Yeah.
And we contract. And we don't use our voice because we remember that time when it was so painful to have the distortion of that voice reflected back to us. When actually, what if that's the very thing we need to step up and own more of who we are, knowing that we're going to be the hero and the villain, like all of the time, because we're both.
Yeah, we are, 100%. So maybe let's just talk about polarity and how you see that playing out. I know we haven't got long because we've only got a limited amount of time. Do you need to?
Well, I need to head off soon, but I would love you to reflect on, because certainly I think that your experience of intensity of sameness or intensity of 24/7 relationship are probably greater than mine, because you have had your husband home for now a year.
Yeah.
So you guys have been living, working, everything together for more than a year.
Yeah, we have.
And you are like the artist of polarity. But how much has this had you having to upskill in your practice of polarity? And how did you know that you were just too much in neutrality? Like, what are the like feedbacks or symptoms that you get in your relationship to know that you've spent too long in neutrality, and how do you activate polarity again?
Well, I was laughing initially, not because I'm like, oh, yes, I'm an artist, but because I'm like, yep, fuck, because it's really hard. Sometimes you're like, this is the best, easiest thing in the world. And sometimes I'm like, fuck, I see it and I don't want to do anything with it. And sometimes I'm like, come on, now's the time for practice, because it is hard. So as I always say, you practice and you build your skills every day so that you build the muscle for when you need it, not you build the muscle at the time you need it. That doesn't tend to work. You can't really 150 kilos the first time you pick up a bar. But if you've been micro training every single day and 2 years later you need to pick up the 250 kilo bar, you can. That's the point of practicing every day. So I want to just probably preface that with, it's fluid, like everything. And sometimes polarity neutrality is going to be the best thing that's ever happened to you because you love it. Like, you're genuinely lit up by it. It's the best thing. I'm literally sitting here with my best friend and it could not be any sweeter. Amazing. It's only a problem if you start to hate that and you start to get needy and resentful and pissed off about the fact that he's not into you, or you're not into him or her, or you're not
or you're bored, or you like just feel same.
Yeah, or you're just feeling like a blobby and blur, like the grey. So it's not a problem unless it doesn't delight your heart in that moment or in the preceding moments afterwards, however long you choose to let that go on for. So I'm always witnessing my own self-talk, and because relationship and sexuality are they're really high values for me, I'm always running. I always feel like I've got an eye on them. There's always a checks and balances, an eye that's watching that going, that's interesting. Do you want to do something with that? So I don't think that part of my brain stops. But whether I choose to do something with it or not is my humanness. So sometimes I'm too sluggy and gluggy in the 24/7 pit of ISO and COVID and work and juggle and kids and a house that's messy an hour after you've cleaned it. And, you know, the sludge of everyday humanness where you're like, ugh, today it can swallow me like a swamp because I can't get out of it.
I love that.
And so I just actually hide in my bedroom on those days and go, that's fine. All of that can exist out there. And I'm going to be here if anybody needs me. I'm in my own cocoon. I am diluting and digesting whatever this is for me right now. And I'll come out of this when I'm ready. So that's generally how I roll. When I recognize that we're getting into a pattern of Netflix or let's watch a movie because I'm tired and that's easier, that's usually an alarm bell for me. Because when I'm picking the easier path, it's rarely because that's what lights me up. It's because I've gotten lazy. And we tend to get pretty lazy in relationship and how we love someone who's not leaving us. Very different to the way that we used to court or show up for someone who we weren't totally sure if they were staying or not. And so I think there's a certain neglect that comes with the surety of long-term, particularly monogamous relationship. So when I notice that laziness creeping in, I usually make myself do something with that. And it can be that I simply go and get changed in that moment, or I put on different underwear, or I say to my husband, okay, we need time tonight. You know, we need to be together, or I let him in on the desire of how I want to feel so that I'm instantly and then doing my own feminine practices to really make sure that I'm pulsing and pumping my body with feminine energy, because that practice pays off by the time I end up having intimate time with my partner. Where that gets really murky and foggy for us, particularly here, is because he's still working a sort of 9 to 5 sort of job. And my job is pretty much every hour outside of that. So that's really hard. So I'm usually working. I get up and meditate now at 6. I'm usually working by 7:30. And then I do the handover with him at like 8:30, 9 o'clock. And then he works. I work in his lunch break. He finishes work and I'm working at dinner time or after dinner time. So that's where it's gotten really hard for us, is we see each other all the time, but we don't spend any time, quality time together, unless we're hugely conscious of the fact that we see that. So what are we going to do about that? And that's how we've rolled with that. I do think that Nick and I still manage to meet our own needs pretty well. I recognize that we both need different things. He needs sport and time with his friends and ways and spaces in which to be masculine and not part of my feminine world. And I need places and spaces to be with the girlfriends and talk and natter and chat and not have to limit my words and my mind and my heart and all of the things. So if polarity is becoming neutral and you're two the same, you must spend more time separate from each other. There must be a space in the house. There must be an altar you can turn up to, or exercise or capacity outside of the home, which I realize is harder in lockdown, but still entirely possible, where those people still meet their individuation needs, so that when they come together, there's a sense of, oh, I've missed you, rather than, oh, here we are and you're still here.
Oh, and you again.
Yeah. Continue to take you for granted because you just can't. So I don't know if that answers your question. So yes, I have a strong muscle for polarity, interrupt and exchange, but I'm also really human and I still hit all of my edges and all of his. And in fact, I had a conversation with him because today's Valentine's Day, and that is always a trigger for me. And I still have not got to the bottom of what that trigger is.
What's the trigger? Like, what is it?
I think it's my hypermasculinization and my subsequent shaming of how much I craved and wanted love and romance, because that was so uncool back in the 90s. Like, you just weren't like that. You were pathetic. And so I think I justified the Aussie bloke. That's probably why I actually, up until Nick, never dated an Aussie, which I still find ironic, because the European men are the most romantic. Like, it's like next level. I fucking love that shit. And then I ended up with an Aussie who really fucking hates that shit.
Yeah.
Which, of course, is perfect, right? But, and he's up-leveled his game in lots of places, but it continues to be a thing I have to massage, because for him, he meets insecurity. And for me, I meet ravenous need, that it's never.
You know, like, but like, and then your neediness actually like makes him not want to provide the thing as well. Yeah.
So I was talking about this morning, and even I noticed myself then getting snappy at him and finding ways to just like whip him, you know, like that, like, there we go, I'm feeling a little bit better because I've let a little bit of that out, but it's not remotely conscious.
Yeah.
And I was like, fuck, I can totally see I'm doing this again. And I'd said something and I knew it was going to piss him off. It pissed him off. And then his thing is he needs space to withdraw. He's avoidant in his attachment style. And that's wounding, and that's his childhood. Of course, he's ended up with the opposite, which I think most avoidant people do, which is an anxious attachment style, which is me. So I watch myself orchestrate and co-create an experience in which I'm back in my childhood experience of insecurity and anxiety about attachment, and he's back in his childhood of avoidance because it's too painful. And yet, as I'm creating the person who's my mother, who moves further away from me, I then instantaneously want to go running after them because that's the anxiousness, right? Think about your kids that are clingy and whiny.
Yeah.
They're only clingy and whiny because they know they're not safe with, like, are you coming back? I don't even know.
Yeah. Yeah.
was literally having this conversation with him today. I was like, wow, fuck, and he was too pissed off to regulate me. And so what I needed to do was own that. So I stood there in that moment, really letting my heart feel that anxiety. And I said to him, I can see this. I can see and honor the fact that you need time away and time to process. And you deserve to have that because that's how you process best. And then you come back to me and I see that and I know that and I witness that and you deserve that. But I need you to know this is really hard for me. This avoidance, disappearing, needing that space is really hard for someone who has an anxious attachment type like mine, and it hurts my heart. I get it. I want it for you. I just need you to know it hurts. And he was, even though he's pissed off, I watched him soften a little bit and go, yeah, I see that. He didn't try to fix it. I didn't ask him to. I went and was with my own tender heart. But just being able to say, I see this and I just need you to see it. He was like, okay. And then consequently that's then opened up different experiences here for the rest of the day. So I don't know how I got onto that, but I think it's worth acknowledging that there's always going to be that pursuer, distancer, anxious, avoidant. They're polarities. They're just different versions of wounding. We ultimately are just really sadistically attracted to our own childhood wounds.
And also to really notice them and not make them wrong, because we have the same dynamic, and it then plunges me into an abandonment wound, and which is incredibly uncomfortable to be in. And I mean, I don't do it as much now, but I used to, like, make it mean all of these things, like just which you then like can lose yourself completely in. And so I love that you've just brought that up and made it safe as an aspect of relationship, even long-term, healthy, juicy relationship, that stuff still shows up.
Oh, because your soul's trying to have a human experience, and some voids are so big they're never going to be healed in totality, right? There's part of us that needs them in order to be the things that our soul needs us to be in this lifetime, right? I mean, that's the values riff.
Exactly.
So I think I just want to say, yes, I think relationship in times of lockdown and certainly in Corona, you have to have individual space and time, totally away from each other, not in each other's pockets. That is an absolute, has to be created for both of you really consciously every single week. You must spend time without each other to balance the resentment you're feeling being together. You must.
Yeah.
So that is an absolute healthcare, I think, for relationship in Corona. You must recognize your habituated lazy patterns and take responsibility for them. An action plan how you are going to move beyond your own collapse and limitations that continues to cycle the sludge you're in, rather than getting and being constructive and moving out of them. And to look at how you can be a better lover so that you are loved better in return. So looking at how they give love, seeing how you can be of service to gift that love language to them so that they witness and see the appreciation, and that you open up conversations knowing you will always hit each other's wounds, always. So the question is not, will we? It's, we will. What are we going to do when we get there? And I think that's how you get through Corona. Is there anything you want to add to that?
No, I think it's beautiful. I think that we've covered heaps here.
Beautiful.
Thank you. So to connect with you, Jules,
is julietenner.love, and you, Bridge?
suburbansandcastles.com. Remember to nourish the woman to rock the family.
And we'll see you next week when we continue to peel back the layers on your mothering journey.
And if you want to support Nourishing the Mother and all the late nights, the early mornings, the blood, sweat and tears we pour into our art, then please go to patreon.com/NTM podcast and become our patron. As a patron, you're helping all of the cost of operating this podcast, the hosting, the editing, the transcription, helping all of that be completely covered, and joining a community who are all about honouring our journeys and continuing to open. The more support we have, the longer we can last. So become a patron. We'd love to have you. Go to patreon.com/NTM podcast. We literally couldn't do this without you. Thank you so much for listening, and please share this podcast with anyone you think it would be medicine for.
This has been a production of TheWellnessCouch.com. Check us out on Facebook and join in the conversation on Facebook.com/The Wellness Couch. Subscribe to each show on iTunes and check us out on Twitter. The Wellness Couch, streaming wellness into your lives.
Whilst the Wellness Couch presenter endeavor to provide accurate and helpful information to their listeners, these podcasts cannot take into account individual circumstances and are not intended to be a substitute for health and medical advice from a qualified health professional. You should always seek the advice of a qualified health professional before acting on any of the information provided by any of the Wellness Couch podcasts.